and to see and listen to remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of that, to Tathagata's words. Good morning, everyone. Good to have you here. I'm curious if there's anyone here at the Dharma talk for the first time here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's always someone it's their first time. So hopefully what happens here will be positive and you'll come back. This is a place that we invite people to come and use as their place to have as refuge and to, as we say, unpack this one mystery that is this life. So great to have you with us. Welcome. Well, there are a lot of things that we could be doing this morning. I mean, I look at all the people in this room and I think if we spent 2 hours, however long it took you to come here, be here for the talk and then go out, if we spent those 2 hours, there might be, 60 people in here, 50 people in here. We'd have 100, 120 hours where we could have cleaned up a neighborhood, or we could have done all sorts of things with those people hours. And we are here. What's going on here? Why is this important? What is the purpose of a monastery? And why spend our time in places like these when the world has so much? You don't have to even turn on the news to know that right now there's so many things that the world needs people for, to address, to put their attention to. So what is the importance of coming to a monastery, to living at a monastery? What is going on here this morning at Green Gulch Farm, Green Dragon Temple Monastery? I'll get to that. So years ago, I was living at Tassajara. It's a monastery off the grid that we have a part of the 3 temples that make up San Francisco's Zen Center. And we have a shop there. And in the shop, sometimes bats get into the shop. And in the springtime, sometimes there's little baby bats that get in there. And unfortunately, someone had left out some electrical tape in the shop and a little kind of ball, and it was had the sticky side still available. And this little baby bat had gotten its wing stuck to this piece of electrical tape with this little ball on the other end. And we came in one morning and it was flopping around, and we thought, well, we certainly have to help this bat. It's probably not going to like it, but what can we do? So we finally figured out a way to get a pillowcase over it and to kind of hold it down as gently as we could and to start to get that electrical tape off of the wing of the bat. And as we started to do the first little, pulling apart, that paper-thin wing of the bat started to tear. And we were just horrified. We were like, what do we do? And the bat, of course, was even more worried because of what was going on. And now it really started to thrash around. It doesn't know that we're trying to help the bat. It doesn't get the fact that we're trying to help it. It just is terrified. It's unsettled. It's ungrounded. I don't know if you've ever felt that way before. Unsettled, ungrounded, not knowing where help might be, thrashing about inside. Eventually, this person found this thing that we were using that was a biodegradable solvent, and we were able to actually get the tape off of the bat's wing without tearing any more of it. And the baby bat flew up into a little alcove, and we don't know what happened after that. Probably sat up there for a few days terrified about his experience with the electrical tape. But this is what happens in our life in so many ways, little tiny micro moments where, someone said something, someone did something, or a big thing that happens. And we feel ungrounded, we feel unsettled. And have you noticed that when you're in that state, how you don't see as clearly? How you don't learn as easily? You don't listen as well? You don't even understand with peripheral vision what's happening around you as well? People have noticed this since there were humans. When I get a little stirred up like that baby bat, I am ungrounded and I don't have all of my faculties. And I am in a place where I'm just thrashing about, wondering why all these people are messing with my wing. Not aware that maybe that was even help. You know, you can choke on the smallest thing, just a little tiny pebble. You can choke. And it's not because the airway is so narrow that you can't breathe around that pebble. But it's because of the constriction. It's the reaction to the pebble. The constriction of the muscles around that little pebble. And because of that, I can't breathe. My reaction to what actually happened makes it to where I can't breathe. And so we have places where we can come and do a little bit of settling. A little bit of grounding. Some way to start with what might eventually end up being in a place where we have the capacity to see and then maybe to react. Now next month we'll be having a ceremony here called Sajiki. And Sajiki is, you know, in mythology they have these hungry ghosts. And these are supposed to be souls that are kind of reborn in a realm of insatiable hunger. They can't really get satisfied. They're even embodied by having these huge heads and these little tiny necks. So it's like you can eat, but you really can't swallow, you know, can't digest. And this is due to their past selfish or greedy actions. And they're trapped in this realm and they're perpetually thirsty and hungry and unable to find true nourishment. And it is symbolic of the parts of us that are not settled yet. They're still wrapped up in greed, hate, and delusion. You know, when we first had this ceremony and I was new to Zen Center, I thought it was kind of like Buddhist Halloween, and I was like, I don't know if this is really my thing, okay. But then we reverse everything. We have like the altar over here, and we put a whole bunch of offerings out to the hungry ghosts. We actually play host to the hungry ghosts, these insatiable beings that are tied up with, you know, greed, hate, and delusion, that are unable to be satisfied. And symbolically, this is us, this is ourselves. How am I with my shadow side? Am I able to be a host, a generous host that lets it settle, that's willing to put out fruit and gifts, and just for one day, look at that shadow side and say, you can't do anything until you settle. Can't do anything until you feel accepted, until you feel a part, until you feel grounded. You're just going to thrash around like a baby bat. And so we're going to put out offerings to you so that you can come and you can have some nourishment, some sense of being cared for. And I invite you to come to Sajiki when we have that. And I guess I should check with the, you know, the public comes? Okay. That's pretty sure. Pretty sure that yeah, so all of a sudden we got 60 people here waiting to feed their hungry ghosts. And yes, please do come. That'll be announced on our website. But that's a different attitude toward that little micro moment when you feel that twinge in your chest or your stomach or the middle of your back, and you think, I wish I was a different person. I wish I reacted differently. I'm X years old. How come I haven't settled this by now? What is it to be host to the hungry ghosts? What is it to be host to the parts of us that are not yet resolved? I mean, if all the parts of you were resolved, you'd probably just turn into a pure beam of light and disappear. I don't know, you know. I mean, the parts of me that are not resolved are very apparent to the people who know me, and they can tell you all about those parts. And then there's some of those parts that I'm aware of, you know. I often talk in our young urban Zen group about awareness of ourself. And you know, writing a list of like the 10 people that you're closest to, and then on one side of the paper, for each person, you know, you write all the stuff that you think that person is great at, you know, all their attributes and how they show up that you appreciate. And then on the other side of the list, you write the stuff that you think they could probably work on. Now, for each of the 10 people that are closest to you, I'm sure you could think of stuff for each of those people that they could work on. Something. You know, you could come up with something, you know. So then I just turn it around and I think about myself. Well, if the 10 closest people to me were writing a list about Michael, what would be on that other side of the list? What do people think that I should be working on? And then some of those things I might be aware of, but how do I hold those things that I become aware of? Do I hold it with antagonism? Do I hold it with harshness? You know, I often, you know, ask folks, you know, if you raise someone from age 0 to age 5 with the voice in your head, would they be a healthy human? You know, how do we actually how are we actually a host to the things that are not yet resolved? And so we have this ceremony where we bring in food and offerings and we make peace with and we help them settle. And in the monastery, one of the very first things is grounding. We have all of these rituals that you have that we do when we come in. And you could just come into your seat and just plop down and start sitting meditation, but we don't do that. We have this whole thing where we play a woodblock, a han, and wherever you are in the monastery, you start to come back to your shashu form, and you come to a little bit of like a somatic pose, ears over the shoulders, nose in alignment with the navel, kind of bringing yourself back to your body, bringing yourself through the door, what foot you step through the door with, all these things all the way till you get to the place where you're facing the wall. Those things could seem like a whole bunch of, you know, arduous gymnastics, but it's actually grounding. It's bringing you back to the body. And we've all been in those places before where we wish that we could be a little bit more grounded. We wish that we could feel like we feel when we're in our, you know, we're sitting in a park, on a park bench on a beautiful day, and we're going to meet our best friend for lunch at our favorite restaurant. We feel kind of open and free and creative and unworried. Don't you wish you could feel like that when you're in the middle of a conversation that isn't going so well? Even if it's not terrible, but you know you just aren't thinking quite as clearly. You're not nearly as creative, a little bit more worried. Years ago, when I was there at Tassajara, I keep saying years ago, I don't know how long years ago is. Is it more than 5, more than 10? You have to get to like 25 or 50 before it's years ago. I mean, I don't know what years ago is these days, but anyway, sometime back there, I was the tenzo, the person who manages the kitchen and the kitchen practice and offerings when they're at Tassajara. And I had a guest cook. In the summer, we have people that come into the monastery, and they had dinner that used to be served at 7 p.m. And we used to have this thing where the guest cook and their assist would make dinner for about 70 to 80 people. And they would spend 6 hours making dinner from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. And other people would have done most of the prep. We would have still done a lot of the, you know, last minute prep. But you're kind of on a clock for 6 hours to get this whole thing done. And somewhere at around, I think it was about 5 p.m., I forget what I did, but it was not going to be that dinner. Oh, I know what it was. I used the wrong tofu. The tofu that I was supposed to actually compost, I did not compost. And the tofu that I was supposed to use, I composted. And then I had made the dinner with the tofu I was supposed to compost. And then I realized it. And now I've got 2 hours before all the people are going to be there for dinner, and I've just ruined dinner. And I had never had, or maybe I just wasn't aware, because I had been at the monastery then for about 5 years, and I had some awareness maybe of my body, but I had what I consider to be my first panic attack. And I just couldn't think. I just couldn't think. I was so worried, you know. And we had the center island in that kitchen, and I just started walking around the center island, just kind of like, oh boy. Oh boy. That's all I could do. I could just like walk around the center island, just like, oh boy. What are we going to do, you know? And I really couldn't think of like what I was going to do, you know? And then after a while, I came back to like a breath practice, and I like sat, and you know, I didn't do something miraculous that changed everything other than just kind of like slowing down for a little bit. But I was so ungrounded. I couldn't think. I couldn't come up with an idea for dinner, you know? And eventually me and the guest cook assist did get our wits about us, and we got together and we made something that was 25 minutes late, and it wasn't an awesome dinner, but it was biodegradable and people ate it, and that was dinner, you know. But there are very few spiritual, if any spiritual practices that you will come across where you solve the mind with the mind. You know, almost every spiritual practice you will find, you start with grounding in the body. You start with settling something that has to do with breath, has to do with how you're looking at things, has to do with what your posture is, has to do with the speed that you're moving, the whole attitude of the body language. And so in the monastery, we start with presence, with grounding. You ever been with someone where just their presence, they just seemed like they were just grounded? They didn't have to say anything. Just their presence. You're just like, yeah, okay, I want what they have. You know, they didn't say a golden sentence. They were just there. But it was obvious that what was going on inside them. Something was happening there where they seemed grounded. And that's why this tradition is so much about warm hand to warm hand, is that there's all these rituals about, you know, how to get to your seat in the zendo, and those can be really great for grounding and getting in your body. And there's also learning from teachers and the people around you. And the wind of the family house, as we call it. How we ground ourselves in our practice, and how we learn from the people who are several years further along in their practice and how they're grounded. And so we start with presence, with grounding, with the body, and then from there, you have the opportunity to become more aware. Because just like that baby bat, we can't be terribly aware that help is happening or even what's going on when we're so flustered that we're just flapping all around. We're not aware of what's happening. So there's really no chance for awareness until there is some grounding. And then when there's some settling and some grounding, then we have the opportunity for awareness, to start to become aware of what's going on. Sometimes we play this dyad in some of our training in the monastery where we sit facing each other, and one person is the asker and the other person is the answerer. And the person who's the asker, for 2 minutes we do this, and we do it with eye contact. 2 minutes of eye contact is pretty intimate these days, you know, it's like, and so one person's asking, the other person's answering. And the person asking says, what's happening now? And the person that is answering just says the first thing, like, I'm self-conscious, or I don't know what to say. And you keep doing that, what's happening now? And then the person, you know, answers, my nose is itching. What's happening now? I'm worried that I'm going to give a bad answer. What's happening now? I'm feeling really relaxed in my body. What's happening now? And you keep going back and forth for a couple of minutes. What's happening now? Being aware of what's happening in the moment. And it's symbolic of our practice of being in the moment and trying to be aware of what's happening now. What's the moment asking for? This person that's in front of me that maybe I find incredibly interesting, or maybe I find incredibly boring, or maybe I find incredibly grating. What's happening now? Noticing my body, noticing what the moment is asking for, and not what I'm inclined to maybe do, which is, propel this conversation that I find really interesting with this really interesting person, even though I really need to go somewhere else. Or maybe this person that I find kind of boring, trying to skip through the conversation and, not really giving them my full attention. Or the person that is maybe grating or whatever and just trying to shut the conversation down and really not giving what they're saying any sort of attention or awareness or whatever. What's happening now? And so the awareness is what happens once we get grounded and settled. And so the practices allow for that grounding and settling. It doesn't force it, believe me. I've been here and not been grounded and settled. But it at least presents the opportunity, and it gives you a container where you can be grounded and settled. And then from there, awareness has the opportunity to take some root, to be able to see what's happening now, what the moment is asking for. And then the last part is adaptability, to actually respond to what the moment is asking for, because now I have a little bit of awareness of what the moment might be asking for. Now, of course, awareness is a direction, not a destination. So I keep becoming more aware of ways in which, this is what the moment's asking for. And then 10 years later, you're just like, but then there's so much more context here, or more nuance, or more whatever. It's something that someone grows in. But you keep taking your best stab at what the moment is asking for based upon the awareness that you have. And then from there, it's the opportunity to adapt to what the moment is asking for. The opportunity. Now, I might choose not to do what the moment is asking for because I just don't want to, and because I don't like what the moment is asking for, and we've all been there before, where you kind of know what to do, you have the awareness of what the moment is asking for, but you're just resistant. It's like, I'm not going to do that. And this is really where the practice, where the rubber meets the road, is, get plagued by awareness. You start to become more aware, more grounded, more aware of what you should be doing, and you're like, oh, shoot. I really wish I was ignorant back when I wasn't really clear about this. But this is the process of setting up these temples to give people a place where they can ground, they can be present, they can be here, they can be in their body. Then we can have some awareness that starts to creep into our daily life. Some clarity starts to happen, like that mountain lake, and when you have the storm, you can't see anything on the surface. And then when it settles, you start to get some clarity. You get to see the reflections. Oh, that's what's going on. And so then the last part, of course, do I really want to, am I willing to adapt to what I am aware of? Presence, awareness, adaptability. Setting up these monasteries so that people have a place to ground. Because we're in all sorts of settings in our daily lives where it just isn't set up for being grounded. Have you noticed that? There's just so much of society that isn't set up for that. But if you're coming here, or you're doing it at home, or you're really working on the body practice and getting grounded and what helps you, you learn different ways you can start taking it out into the other places. Because Zen is a 24/7 thing. It isn't a destination that come and you do it here. We just do it here, like you come and you have a place to practice the violin or a place to practice basketball. It's a place to practice. But it's not where the game takes place. The game takes place out there. The game takes place, well, unless you live in the monastery, then the game takes place here all the time. But, you take it out, and that is where you are using those principles. Like, for instance, just as one example, whenever we drink water, we ask that people sit down and that they give it their full attention and that they use two hands. and they just drink water. Now, have you ever felt plagued by your mobile phone? I mean, these things that are just so powerful and amazing that you take the most recent mobile phone and 40 years ago you could have ruled the planet with it, you know. Now you just take it for granted and we just throw it in our back pocket or, you know, throw it on the bed or whatever, you know. What if for the next month, every time you picked up that mobile phone, you did it with two hands and you just gave it like your full attention? And there was only one place that it lived at home, and one place that it lived at work, and one place that it lived in your bag. And you always, you know, maybe even took the case off of it, you know. You're just like, I'm going to treat this like my own eyes, you know. And you gave it some sort of veneration. And then you started to have a relationship with it where it wasn't just something that's interrupted you all the time, but then maybe you would start taking it into, oh, well, how is this thing programmed? And what do I want to come forward? And how do I want to come to it? There's infinite ways you can take what's in the monastery out into the world. At one point in time, I realized that as much as I love pizza, I never just eat pizza. And I mean, I eat pizza, but I eat pizza and listen to music. I eat pizza and talk on the phone. I eat pizza and listen to podcasts. I eat pizza and talk to people. You know, I even sometimes eat pizza standing up, walking around my apartment, you know. But what is it to just eat pizza? It just to sit. You know, when we have meals here, we have this silent time at the beginning. And you know, we ask the people not be wearing, you know, headphones, listening to podcasts or whatever. You know, it's just you and your food. And it's a golden time to just give your full attention to eating. And sometimes when I would do this thing at home with my pizza, you know, piece of pizza on the plate, totally silent, I'm all by myself, I realized, I feel a little bit lonely. Or I feel a little bit anxious. Or I feel like eating way more pizza than I should. And I start to become more aware of actually what I'm feeling when I'm eating pizza. But I have all these distractions going on, so I'm not even aware of what's going on when I'm eating. And we have this one little, you know, principle in the monastery where we have silent time before we start talking. 10 minutes at the beginning of every meal. You get your food, you sit down. And, you know, at first when I came to the monastery, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to come 10 minutes late. You know, I want to talk to my friends and, you know, I don't want to just be sitting there with my food, you know. But then it's like, then I started realizing the purpose of it. It's like, oh yeah, this is time I can take back. This is a time I can be grounded, can be with the thing that's in front of me. There are infinite ways you can take the stuff that's in the monastery out to where we live. And so they're here so that you can see them as a collection. You can see them as a practice. You can get grounded in them. But not because that's where they live is here. This is the practice place. There was a time not so long ago when I work as an administrator at Zen Center in the administrative offices. And I was having a lot of just meetings on a screen with Zoom, one after another. And I was really busy this period of time. And during the end of the year, oftentimes we send different thank you cards to people. As an administrator, they wanted me to write a little thank you note to these folks. And they gave me a stack of about 100 of them. And they kept sitting there on my desk. And I just never got to them. And I'm like, I'm going to have to dedicate like 3 hours this weekend to like doing cards. But then stuff would come up on the weekend. And then eventually it got to the place the only way I was going to be able to do it was during the workday. So, in between my Zoom meetings, I would do 3 cards, you know. And I felt kind of burdened by this. But what I noticed after a couple days is that my meetings went better. And I would stop my meeting, and then I would put my mind into this kind of, you know, tactical thing, thinking about another person, expressing gratitude to them in between my meetings. And then I would go to the next meeting and I wouldn't feel quite as wound. And I'm like, okay, this is Zen at work. This is Zen with my office job. This is Zen with This is, the work practice of being in a place that has a desk and a computer. And so I've taken that practice and used that along with many others in order to help a role that largely has to do with sitting at a desk and looking at a screen. But it just grounded me. And there's these little clues that you find in the monastery that you can take out and you can bring to other places. Practice is a setup. It's a setup for something that's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to work. You might feel different about your mobile phone. You might feel different about your pizza. You might feel different about that next Zoom meeting. But the beauty of it is that it's not about self-help, do A to get B. It's that over time, these things actually elicit different things that come forward inside my reaction to stimulus from the outside. I start to become someone who is a little bit more grounded. And I don't know when it is that I'm going to become less this or less that, the thing that I came to Zen for. But I just know over a period of time in my rearview mirror, I'm not in Kansas anymore. I just know that somehow or another it took root over some period of time. It's like going to sleep. It's a setup. We do this every day, and that's how practice works. You don't just go, oh, I got to go to sleep. It's 10 p.m. And you walk into your room, you lie down on your bed and go, no, you don't do that, You start to wind down, you change your clothes, you change the lighting. You probably don't do anything that's terribly high energy, hopefully. You don't eat some huge thing 5 minutes before bed, drink a whole bunch of caffeine. No, you do all these things that you think are going to support sleep, And you probably have a place where you do sleep that supports sleep, And then eventually through all this stuff that you're doing, you don't know when it happens, but at some point you're just sleeping. And that's what the practice is that we're doing here. We don't know at what point this will take root and you will become less anxious, less angry, less worried, less jealous, less petty, all the stuff that, we try to hide. I generally try to hide all the ways that I'm still 5 or 10, so that you won't think that I'm anything but beautiful, strong, and brave. But then there's all these things where I notice in my body, based upon that thing that just happened, I'm like, oh yeah, wish I was older. You ever have that feeling? The wish I was older feeling? It's not about being older. Everyone is just on their own trajectory of getting settled in the different points and areas of their life. Just like falling asleep, we don't know when different things will take root. But if we start to design our lives where it's a setup for falling asleep, it's a setup for being more grounded, it's a setup for being more present, then we've taken the monastery and the purpose for being here this morning out into the world, and that's a gift to the world. That's something that the world can use. How many places can you think of that the world could use people that were a little bit more grounded? A little bit more aware. We're learning how to be that gift by being here, by engaging in this practice. Because the world needs people that are way more grounded, that can be in the difficult conversation and can have it unfold and have them not be entirely wound and just thinking in kind of ego land and defensive land and reactive land, and being able to hold things from a little bit broader perspective. That's what the world needs. And that's why it's so important that we get together and remind each other of our practice on mornings like this. Because otherwise, it'd just be better if we were out cleaning up a neighborhood or doing something else with all these people hours. But we're here reminding ourselves of practice and coming back around, because as humans, we forget. And just like we were talking about with warm hand to warm hand, with that person that we thought of, that we knew, that had a lot of presence, that was grounded, we're learning to be that person. We're learning to be with other people and to notice how other people are, especially those that help us, and learning to be that person for other folks. You absorb the example in the monastery, and that's the gold of being here. I had a friend one time who lived in Montana growing up on a ranch, and they said, I learned everything I needed to know about mending a fence by working with this old cowboy. Now, if you know cowboy culture, I grew up in Oklahoma, so I knew a few cowboys. Cowboys don't say a lot of words. And my friend, she said, I grew up in Montana learning how to mend fences from this old cowboy. And she said, he might have said a sentence or two every day. But it wasn't about the words. It was about how the person went about the thing that they were doing, how they embodied it, the attitude, the presence, what they paid attention to, the body language. I don't know if you know the poet Billy Collins. He's one of my favorite modern poets, was a poet laureate. I want to read you this poem about being with an old cowboy. But it's not an old cowboy, it's the spirit of being with an old cowboy. This is called Shoveling Snow with Buddha. Shoveling Snow with Buddha by Billy Collins. In the usual iconography of the temple or the local walk, you would never see him doing such a thing, tossing the dry snow over a mountain of his bare round shoulder, his hair tied in a knot, a model of concentration. Sitting is more his speed, if that is the word for what he does or does not do. Even the season is wrong for him. In all his manifestations, is it not warm or slightly humid? Is this not implied by his serene expression, that smile so wide it wraps itself around the waist of the universe? But here we are, working our way down the driveway, one shovelful at a time. We toss the light powder into the clear air. We feel the cold mist on our faces, and with every heave we disappear and become lost to each other in these sudden clouds of our own making, these fountain bursts of snow. This is so much better than a sermon in church, I say out loud, but Buddha keeps on shoveling. This is the true religion, the religion of snow and sunlight and winter geese barking in the sky. And I say this to him, but he's too busy to hear me. He has thrown himself into shoveling snow as if it were the purpose of existence, as if the sign of a perfect life were a clear driveway that you could back your car down easily and drive off into the vanities of the world with a broken heater fan and a song on the radio. All morning long we work side by side, me with my commentary and he with his generous pocket of silence, until the hour is nearly noon and the snow is piled high all around us. Then I hear him speak. After this, he asks, can we go inside and play cards? Certainly, I reply, and I will heat some milk and bring some cups of chocolate to the table while you shuffle the deck. Ah, says the Buddha, lifting his eyes and leaning for a moment on his shovel, before he drives the thin blade again deep into the glittering white snow. Shoveling Snow with Buddha by Billy Collins. Being with someone that has presence, that is grounded in what they're doing, whether it's a Zoom call or it's a ritual here in the monastery. And learning how to be that person that is with the thing that's in front of them, answering the question of what's happening now in a way that we are aware is, as far as we can tell, most appropriate. Living up to that bodhisattva vow. The bodhisattva vow, of course, is the one of not being here just trying to seek Michael's end of suffering, but to climb up to that metaphorical wall that's looking down on maybe enlightenment or lack of suffering on the other side, but not doing it to get over there, but staying on the top of the wall to help other people up. To be a gift to the world. We say that when we leave here, we leave with nothing. And we also say we leave here with gift-bestowing hands. And they're both true. Because we don't take anything with us. We are the gift. What happened here in the monastery, that is the gift. The grounding, the settling, the awareness, the ability or the opportunity now to adapt to what is happening now. And so I invite all of you to please keep coming back here and practicing with us, practicing wherever it is that you are, learning the things that help you be grounded with your computer screens or your pizza, and being that gift to the world and answering that question of what's happening now. So now I think we do Q&A.
Plenty of time for questions, and I'll come around in a moment with the microphone.
Hi, my name is David, and I've been questioning what's been going on in my life in a couple of situations that seem connected. And one was coming back on an airplane trip, and my next seat neighbor and I were talking. He was talking about intelligent design, and I'd heard the term, didn't really understand what it was about, thought it was interesting. He was so passionate about it. And then I got home, and a dear friend of mine that I'd just been with for a weekend sent me 2 books on Plato's Revenge, and these were on intelligent design. So my question is, what is this all about?
What is intelligent design all about, or
Right, yeah.
running into people on airplanes?
Well, no, more generally, what is it?
Can you say a little bit more about intelligent design, or what it is that you were intrigued by?
Well, I've had situations in my life that don't lend themselves to any kind of coherent explanations. I was at 19. I was driving a VW at 70 miles an hour, and it went out of control, and I hit a railing and came out of the car and landed on my feet without any momentum in any direction, without any broken bones, and just wondered what this all meant. And and there were other less dramatic episodes that just I couldn't figure out by the logic and my rational sense.
Yeah. What is going on here?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. I would love to know that answer. I think that one of the beautiful things about this practice is that it really micro-focuses us on what's going on right in front of us. I've never died. I don't know what happens after I die. I've heard a lot of theories about how we all got here. But someone asked the Buddha once, why are we here and what happens when we die? And the Buddha answered the question, that's not the question. And I was like, oh, wait a second, is the Buddha insulting people now? But no, it was more just a setup for the holding of the question, which is there's a lot of things that we may or may not know or think we know, but the focus is around what's right in front of us that we can do something about. The next person we meet, how we can connect to them, how we can best show up for a difficult conversation, a person who's in need, how we can not skip through that person who's the barista, but can actually appreciate a person who's stuck in maybe an incredibly busy, harried day. Whether or not some of these philosophical, bigger 50,000-foot questions are this way or that way, I'm not sure. If you've got 6 hours, I could tell you some of my theories, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I'm just trying to answer one smaller question, which is what's happening now. And I don't mind entertaining those things either, but I don't know what the answer is.
Thank you.
Hi there. Good morning. So you were talking about the process of going to sleep and how you kind of turn the lights down and do certain things and so forth. And so each night I do all of that, and I'm about to go to sleep, and all of a sudden I decide that I grab my phone and I want to go on YouTube. And I don't know why, I do this pretty much every night. I start to do the YouTube thing, and then it does settle my mind, and then I go to sleep. And I don't understand why I struggle just to let myself go to sleep at night without that. So it's just something that I'm like, yeah, is there a way? I'm sure there is a better way. How can I do that? And what's causing this mind to want to do that higher paced, energetic thing right as I'm settling down?
Yeah. Well, you're probably the only person that's tempted to look at their phone late at night, but I'll deal with this unique situation. We know about the dopamine hits we get from all the little pixels and that kind of thing, and the micro neurons that kind of fire when the ends of our fingers actually move and touch things, which is how they've actually worked with people that have spinal cord injuries and that kind of thing. So we know that there's real connection there as far as something that's going on that is a stimulus. Now it's true, different people do fall asleep under different circumstances. So the whole falling asleep thing, that's infinite. I've been in countries where 10 p.m. everybody has a giant meal, and I'm just like, really? But, and then everybody goes to bed and they sleep, So I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell the whole country they can't sleep. Apparently they do. So there's different ways in which people might fall asleep. The question that I would more ask, or if, looking at the situation is, what is the long-term impact of my relationship with technology in regard to impulse, in regard to what it is that I might absorb? Even if I fall asleep, I'm still absorbing something that is coming in. I'm still having the impulse habit that is, what's the long-term effect of that impulse habit? So just like the analogy of falling asleep and doing practice, I don't know the ultimate long-term impact of me coming in here and really being grounded in my body and sitting and doing zazen based upon the whole setup for 2 minutes, all the ritual of getting there, versus if I just came here and plopped down and started watching and sitting and looking at the wall. But I know that over time, I have seen the impact of practice. And so what I would more talk about would be body of work. Is my life working for me? Do I have anxieties, worries? How am I in regard to feeling collected and grounded? How am I in feeling, all those sorts of things? All the things that we have in our life that are habits are packing things into that river of life. And then we're getting this macro result as to how things are generally working for me. Now, maybe you're one of the people that can look at their phone and go to sleep. Many people can't do that, but some people can. And some people can eat a giant Thanksgiving dinner and go to sleep too. But I even know friends that drink coffee at 9:30 p.m. at night and then go to sleep, But that isn't necessarily the bellwether of what it's doing to you long term. And I would just look and see, all the different aspects of the relationship with technology and whether or not that's working for you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I am a trauma therapist. I work a lot with people's trauma, and recently a friend of mine kind of brought up a trauma in me, which is humbling. And I'm wondering, normally I would think that the only thing to do as difficult emotions and sensations come up is be in the body, be with the breath, and just keep doing that over and over again. But I'm wondering if you would have any other practice or advice you give to people who are experiencing some kind of trigger reaction.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, because it brings up a whole other area that I won't spend an hour on, but I would love to comment on, because there are definitely things outside the practice, depending upon how acute the trauma is, that need to be addressed directly, whether it is therapy, whether it is medication, or whether it's something like mindfulness-based stress reduction that people would engage in. So I think, number one, it has to do with how acute it is and how impactful it is to the person's life, And that said, even the breathing techniques that we do that maybe aren't, strictly a part of Buddhism, but like the 4-7-8 breathing technique, where you breathe in 4, you hold for 7, you exhale for 8, and it gives your whole central nervous system this signal that nothing needs to be panicked over, and it actually lowers your blood pressure. Now, you can do that before you enter a meeting each time, let's say, because you get a little bit nervous before you go into a meeting. And so you've learned this thing that you can do. And I think it's great to learn those things that you can do. And you can also subtly tell yourself that you need something before you go into the meeting. And that's part of what the practice is studying, is whether or not each time I get this feeling in my body, I need to tell myself, oh, I need to take my medication. Oh, I need to do this breathing technique. Oh, whatever. Sometimes it's great just, I'm going to go into the meeting and I feel that thing in my chest and it's like, it's not that overwhelming. And I'm just going to learn how to be with it. I'm going to go out to the stairwell and just kind of like, just be like that. There was this picture of a monk one time that was sitting out on I think it was like a hillside in the middle of this political situation that was really fraught, and it said, bearing his burden nobly. It's just kind of like just being like, I didn't choose this. I didn't have a project plan to feel like this. This is just what I inherited from being me at this time in the universe. Bearing my burden nobly. Not disparaging. How come I feel this way or whatever. So there's a dance that has to do with how acute it is. How immediate it is, and also not falling into self-help, where every single time that something happens, I need to solve it. Because then I'm just like, I don't want to be lonely with my pizza. I'm going to turn on the podcast, or I'm going to, whatever. I don't necessarily like to feel lonely, but if I don't feel the highs and lows of being a human being, and every time that I feel a little bit of then I find some way to exit and feel, excited or happy or whatever, But I just sit there with my pizza, just eat my pizza, feeling lonely. And, society gives us so many ways to escape these days and not feel the lows. And it's great to just, who knows how many brilliant songs we wouldn't have if people never felt the lows or whatever, or poetry or whatever. People even write poetry, So I do think that learning to be with what's happening is a very powerful thing in a goalless context, because it lets it unfurl naturally into a certain aligning in the universe. And based upon how acute it is, someone might need to learn a tip or a trick, or go and see someone like yourself and do some real deep work.
Time for one more.
Hi, that was a wonderful talk too, a good reminder for practice. I was just going to comment on this gentleman's thing about escaping in YouTube or whatever, but I noticed for myself, I want to meditate, but it's so much easier to put on a movie, you know, before I go to bed. And I think there's something about changing the channel, you know, for me, like it is an escape, but it's like I get a break from myself. And I think, you know, I used to believe this thing where if I had a problem and I couldn't really, you know, it was really bugging me, I would just go listen to somebody else and hear their story. And then it would just kind of relieve me, like, oh, okay, I'm just not alone or whatever, and it's not such a big deal or whatever. So I don't know, I guess there's some level of escapism in the movie, but I also, I can sleep afterwards, unless it's, you know, too violent or something, which I generally avoid. But yeah, I think it's just changing the channel for me. But then I get mad at myself too, because I think you're wasting your time. You know, you should be in bed right now.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, because I think that the rejuvenation is something to study, and what it is that rejuvenates us. You know, if I never just sat and meditated, and if I always watched YouTube, you know, there'd be a certain effect. But what it is that we take in, there was a documentary a long time ago in 2000 called Jazz by Ken Burns, and there's something about that documentary that just calms me down. And like sometimes when I'm just feeling some sort of way at night, I'll just put that on and watch that documentary, and I don't know, I feel really good, you know. But if I always put on something and try to get away from how I was feeling, because a lot of what happens when we sit is we're just open with acceptance of however it is that we're feeling, and however it is, whatever manifestation is coming forward with mental formations and body sensations. And so you're opening yourself up to who knows what, you know, when that happens. And because shikantaza, or just sitting, isn't necessarily a do A and get B sort of scenario, but it's like a long-term game, sitting at night when maybe you're incredibly disturbed may or may not be the thing for that night, you know? And maybe it would be great to put on a documentary or listen to some music. But if that's all we ever did, then we wouldn't be in touch with what was going on here, and we would tell ourselves that we can't handle it subconsciously and that we need something else, which is not the truth, with a small t. May our intention equally extend to every